Guys, I know that it's a little difficult sometimes for people who've not found their way into what I call real life yet to understand the importance of what we're going to be talking about right now, and that's that pipeline. That's how you get in. You know, the assumption is when you're in college, man, I got to get out of here. I can't wait. I can't wait to start my career. And years ago, I used to tell folks that years ago, you had college recruitment, which still goes on, but it's a little different now. It's much harder, quite frankly, to land a job. It used to be if you graduated, your GPA was decent enough, recruitment came, you got a job. It might not be exactly the job you wanted, but you were going to get some type of job. That isn't necessarily the case anymore as the field shrinks. But in this field, the want for particularly people of color is rabid right now. Let's talk a little bit about that pipeline and what these young people should be doing to make sure that they are included in that pipeline and work their way up. Anybody?
Well, let me say, first of all, I didn't have that experience, that recruiters come to the campus and doing their thing. But anyhow.
So what experience did you have?
Hustling to get any job, because going back, I went to school at Swarthmore's on the East Coast. I went back to the West Coast, and no one had heard of the school. And then for the jobs that there were out there, I was overqualified, supposedly. So I had to tell them I didn't have a degree and just talk the subject. And they said, okay. And so I got in low voltage wiring and went on up. But to get back to your question, there's a talent crisis globally. I think Korn Ferry put out a report just recently that talked about 2020, 2025, 2035, an absolute talent deficit globally. And I think there's only one country, one developed or developing country that had a surplus. And I think the surplus was a zero, so however that math works out, and that was India. The rationale for bringing in people of color, and especially in this country, is that we have a number of gaps in our knowledge. So as businesses go to be relevant to their market, to their customer base, they also need to understand what is that customer base interested in, what things drive them, what's important in general. And we have so much talent sitting on the sidelines, and we have a deficit of talent globally. So I would say it's not so much about the recruiting, it's the need. It's the absolute need to have talent. And if we don't have the talent, we can't survive. And no company survives with less talent.
Faye, if I may, let's define what we're calling pipeline. A lot of times we use buzzwords.
Yes.
Let's define what we're calling the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally speaking, I just have to make one correction. I am not the director of the National Science Foundation. I am a program director.
Okay,
So let me make that clear.
See,
Because
let's
if
see
you,
what
I understand. So if you, whatever you do in social
Well, we
media,
have given her
please
a
do not.
promotion today.
She deserves it.
But yes, thank you
Okay.
for the clarification.
Yes. So we have defined the pipeline as anything looking from K through 16 as that pathway. How are we preparing young people for these disciplines and for these fields? And where are there leaks in the pipeline? I happen to think that somehow the pipeline analogy is inept. And the reason why I say that is because we all know that it takes a certain amount of preparation from K through 12, even pre-K, to prepare for STEM disciplines. We also know that there are some structural barriers that happen educationally. There are gaps. There are opportunity gaps. There are economic gaps. There are educational gaps. And those gaps, unfortunately, hinder Black and brown communities much more quickly. Yeah. And so therefore, when we're looking at this pipeline, we really do need to be asking ourselves, what are the structural barriers as we're preparing people along a trajectory? Because now institutions are moving and the world is moving towards lifelong education. I mean, And in my role as a faculty member, I still go to school every summer for 2 weeks out of a summer, so that I can stay on top of the types of technologies that we're talking about here.
Is one of those gaps larger than the other, or more prominent, or more problematic, if you will? You know, I often think, in spite of the ills that we have on an uneven playing field educationally and the like, the opportunity gap, in my mind,
Yes.
is the biggest.
Yes, because face it, and there was a report, I understand the Korn Ferry report, but by and large, there was a report by the Brookings Institution that was put out that says competence-based, computer-based knowledge will not get us out of the shortage that we're facing. You can teach anyone Python. You can teach anyone how to do data science, but the opportunity gaps once they land into these corporate and or graduate school opportunities, there's the opportunity gap. And in that opportunity gap is really a cultural climate issue that we really need to prepare young people for.
Tell us what it says, your byline, if correct. It says talent inclusion. Are you a scout? What do you specifically do in that role?
Yeah, so I have the privilege of working with our community partners and then industry partners and building programs that really talk about diverse talent, bringing talent into the organization, but then educating our leaders on how to be more inclusive to the workforce that we have, and then driving our internal metrics and goals. So it's about building programs, building relationships, and making the company the best that it can be for our own internal groups.
What do you look for? And this is where, even for those of you who are bored right this very second, I'm going to point some of you out and tap my man right there. See, I call people out. Tap my man right there. G Money. That's how we doing. All right? My man. The reason, no, I don't do that to embarrass anybody. The reason, because the question I'm about to ask is important. I don't want anybody in the room to miss it, because that's why you're here. I get it. I said before we started, it can be a long day, it can be taxing. I used to be that dude in the back of the room sometimes, right? Not all the time, but sometimes. I want them to hear, what do you look for outside of the idea of just knowing? I'll ask all of you, just knowing the skill level of whatever your discipline is. What else do you do? Yeah. What else do you look for? What are the intangibles that we're looking for?
I am a people person, right? I think being in HR, I look for people that are willing to raise their hand for something, people that are going to be engaged. I'm not always saying you have to be an extrovert, but somebody that's going to take the time to think about working with a team, that's going to be engaged with the work that they're doing. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you have to bring something else to the table rather than just your smarts. So, I mean, and that will be like people in this room, right? I think anybody has the opportunity and ability to succeed, and sometimes they need the right mentor. So people make those connections within a workforce.
What would you suggest?
Yeah, I would suggest that it really is about relationship management. Relationships are extremely important. And that is the professor that you meet in your freshman year, your sophomore year, your junior. Some of you that are in here, students, I already know your professors. I know your professors because A, I went to school with them, or either I've come in contact with them at the National Science Foundation. And it's those relationships that really create only 2 or 1 degree of separation. And recognizing that it is those relationships that need to be cultivated and they need to be managed. And that's a skill that we don't teach. We teach you how to code, we teach you how to solve a problem. And the reality is, it's the relationships that matter. And I would suggest it's more than just mentoring. It's about allyship. It's about the people that will speak for you when you are not in the room. What would they say? That's what it's about.
Yeah, and I'd say on the surface, especially in the interview process, it's about the amount of energy you bring. Do you question the interviewer, or are you just going to sit back and listen to anything? What are you curious about? What's driving you to do what you're doing? I think those are the most critical on the surface. I think beyond that, again, to Faye's point, how well do you network? How well do you communicate with others? And your style of communication and your volume of communication is critical. And then the other piece in terms of the networking, so to speak, is how well do you listen? Do you pay attention? Are you fidgety? Or are you somebody who's half listening and going off on a different tangent? I mean, can we stay on subject?
So think about this. And the reason I did what I did is this. Let's say there are, 55 of you in here, and I'm looking for somebody to employ. Your assumption is, well, they're not hiring me. But to your point, you don't know what's going to happen in a year or two. Now, there are 55 of you who are potential employees. And as I look about, I can see 3 people over here talking while they're talking. I can see 2 people on their phones. So really, to a great degree, you might be the brightest person and the best employee for me at that time, but you've already, to a great degree, eliminated yourself. Because often it's about presentation. And that's what I want you guys to think about beyond just, as you suggested, the coding and all the things that you're doing in there for the competition. I think it's brilliant that Black Enterprises decided to fill your head with this knowledge as well, because we don't teach that. Talk to me a little bit about, and then I'm going to come out and get some questions from you guys, but talk to us a little bit about what you would encourage people to look to, because as we said earlier in the first session, technology is changing every 2 seconds. The business I'm in, communications, news gathering, content. When I first started, you were prohibited from doing all of that because a camera, just one single camera, no one could afford. Literally, you're talking back then, $15,000, $20,000. Now, everybody with an iPhone is a reporter, making a movie, so it's completely different, and every few months it's changing for us. So we're trying to figure that game out. Give us, if you will, just a peek in what you would suggest that these folks look to down the way, in the future.
I think there are a couple of things you can look to. I think, first of all, you need to open up yourself. And by that, I mean in terms of subject matter content. I know all of you are computer scientists, information scientists, data scientists. I heard some marketing. I would say step out of your discipline, because the problems that are going to be solved where we need you to solve them are interdisciplinary problems. You need to understand from the context. You cannot solve a healthcare problem with your tech without understanding the healthcare problem. So understand context, first of all. I think that's really important. I always challenge young people. I say, read a book that's outside of your discipline. So one of the things I decided to do, and it's in my bag now, is I'm rereading Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eyes. And someone would say, why, as a computer scientist or engineer, Faye, why are you reading The Bluest Eyes? Because I'm getting context. And besides, my mother told me years ago that Toni Morrison's a great author. So I think understanding context and thinking interdisciplinary is really important. And the other thing is, you have to understand the language of business. So for the Dell employee who was up here earlier this morning that said he was an industrial engineer who couldn't quite figure it out and he's kind of helter-skelter, he went back and got an MBA, I'm that same person. So understanding the business proposition for what you are going to design and implement is really critical, because when you look at who's at the head of most organizations, it's not really someone that just has a sole engineering or computer science degree. That's fact.
What would you suggest?
I say learn to collaborate. When you work in a big company, you have to work with different groups. It's not always easy. These are not meant to be your friends, but you have to work with people, and you have to learn how to deal with difficult situations. Learn, educate yourself on, to your point earlier, things outside of your discipline. The more well-rounded you are about what's going on in the business, know the business acumen, the more prepared you're going to be. Business changes rapidly, so what's happening today is not necessarily what's going to be happening tomorrow. Be comfortable in the gray. So business is not black and white. Know and be able to work in that type of dichotomy where there's not always going to be an answer that you're going to like. So you have to be flexible and learn how to work with people across the bridge. Yeah.
And I'd say learn just a little bit of patience, but be urgent with your patience. And what I mean by that is sometimes you want to speak up right away. You want to refute a statement. Give yourself a 2 or 3 second, television is a 7-second pause, but give yourself just a pause before you respond and think about how that person may react to what you're saying, or rather, how you're saying what you're saying.
And we see that on social media every day with celebrities, right? They hit that send, and then they go, oh, right? And you wish you hadn't sent this. I'm going to try something that obviously I know absolutely there'd be no way to get to the conclusion I think I'm going to get to, but do me a favor, guys, stand up for me. Just the students, just the students.
Oh, a bunch of happy folks over there.
Them old folk was like, oh, shit. All right. If you believe, as you said earlier, that your school, your high school, and maybe even your college did not give you enough of either the education and you're playing catch up, didn't have the equipment that was up to date, has kind of put you behind. If your schools have given you that, sit down. If your school, again, if your school did not provide you with the tools that you think you should have to this point, or you were working on antiquated equipment, sit down. So you said you were, so you got to sit down, because that's what you told me. Got me? Again, if you feel, so anyone who feels, let me try it this way. Anyone who feels that they're walking in their best place today, right? You've had the best possible education, you've had the best possible equipment to work on, stay standing.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, no, check it out now.
Wow.
Any of you who had, of the 3 that remain, think about this. Of the 3 that remain, how many of you had relatives in this business? Stay standing. Okay, I'll go with. Of the 2 remaining people, how many of you have a mentor that you feel really engages you day to day? Stay standing.
Wow.
All right, now I'm going to get to your kind of. What does that mean?
Both of my parents are teachers, so they are very well versed in education, the best education.
All right, so I'm going to count them on the second question. Do you have another mentor on a day-to-day, a week-to-week? Sit down then. So I did that unscientifically to show you what most minorities face.
Right.
Now, if I was at a white school, I promise you we'd have a few more people standing. Just by the happenstance of being born white in this country, the opportunities you are given far and away lap you the first couple of rounds around the track. And so this is what you're facing. This is why it's so important to listen, to start to hear, to start developing relationships. Some of you need to be able to come out here, come out of this weekend, and know that you have someone at Dell, someone at Black Enterprise, someone that you will be able to correspond with occasionally. Right? And it doesn't mean, and I told you in the first session, somebody will give you a business card and they mean well, but you may never hear from them again. But your goal is to find that person, because success really is about everything that we've been hearing these folks say. And that's what you all had to sit down for. I don't say that to be discouraging, right? I say that to be encouraging about why I want you to wake up and listen and not be bored at times when it's boring. Okay, so let's just make sure that we understand where we sit, because success is still around the corner. It just takes you a little longer to get there. But sometimes it can be sweeter. So I'm going to open it up to questions. And don't forget, I want to share that story with you. I told you I'm old. I forget stuff, so don't just let me forget. All right, questions. Yes, ma'am. We're going to get a microphone to you. Hang on just a second. Okay, here's the first lesson of being, hold on. Here's the first lesson that I always tell the folk who are handling the microphones. Let me see that. Never give that mic up. Because come on, stay with me. I know you're tired. I'm tired too. I missed my flight. Girl, you better get over here. Gonna hold that mic because, you know, she might think she Beyonce or something. Start singing. I know, All right.
Okay, my name is Nia Randolph. I am a graduating senior from Dillard University. And we've talked a lot about mentorship and reaching down and making sure that you're bringing people back up. But one of the trends that I've noticed is a lot of times you all are seeking out people that are pretty already, I guess, refined and professional and things of that nature. But to what degree are you seeking out diamonds in the rough and helping to groom them, not in a way that incites, and that interaction just kind of made me think about that, not in a way that incites humiliation or shock, but in a way that's helpful and really allows them to internalize what you're trying to teach them.
I'll take that one. Can I take that one?
Yeah, go for it.
So the diamond in the rough, I was the diamond in the rough, right? So, and I think to part of this preparatory privilege or opportunity that you may or may not have had, you know, I always tell the young people that I mentor, a lot of which, and I say, don't let your zip code define where you are going to be. Because if you had done for all your predictive models, if you had run all of the factors in your predictive models and your machine learning and your data science, and you picked up on me and what zip code I grew up in, you wouldn't have predicted that I would have been here on the stage. So I say that to say is that I take I don't have a lot of hair, but what I say is I let my hair down, and I say, okay, we're gonna roll our sleeves up, and we're gonna talk on the 100. Can young people relate to that, what I'm saying? Yeah. All right, so we're gonna talk on the 100. And so when I had those 100 conversations, you gotta put your phones down, turn the mics off, right? Because there will be no taping, because sometimes the language may go south, but you'll understand where I'm coming from. So I get it, and I do that all the time. And I don't want to give the appearance that we always talk to people that are defined, well-defined. Because for me as a professor, when I'm in my professor mode, the student that I'm able to touch the most is the student that is the diamond in the rough. Yeah.
So let me say something. You said humiliation and shock, right? So let's look at that. The reason I called my man up, the first thing I said is I was that dude. So I said I didn't do that too, but here's the reality. Life will humiliate you sometimes and shock you sometimes, right? So if somebody gives you that love, that humiliation from love and that shock from, when the person who doesn't love you gives it to you, you are better equipped. And so honey, trust me on that one, because you will be that, right? So now you have at least experienced it, because often we don't experience it, and that's when I was talking about how we intake it, right? Sometimes we get our back up sometimes, right? We start to fight sometimes much quicker than we need to, rather than intaking and say, okay, I know where this is coming from. It can come from a good place or a bad place. It really is about how you intake it, how you process it, and how you let it out, even when it's from a bad place. So understand, it will sometimes not be given the way you want it. Not you, but any of us. And we all have to learn how to deal with that too.
And Ed, if you don't mind, let me just add, sometimes information will be given to you and it may be a little harsh. It doesn't mean the person doesn't care about you.
Right.
They're trying to help you see something that you can't see. And it's really incumbent upon you to just listen for a bit and get past the anger side of it. And maybe sometimes you'll be looking your worst. I mean, I've been to some of the campuses and folks coming out in their rollers and flip-flops, and what's the impression you're supposed to receive from that? But you gotta actually talk to the person, you gotta listen to them. And sometimes when they give you that little bit of advice, you may not like it, but at least listen to it so later on you can digest it.
Another question? Okay, don't let me get to Mike.
Not one.
Another question. Listen,
Come on, young
we can
people.
close it out. I'll continue to talk to them, but this is your opportunity. You're not going to always have these opportunities. So, anybody? Another question? Okay, yes, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Osei Uwari, but I go by Osei. I am a recent graduate from Houston Tillotson University. I'm kind of a new hire here. I've been here for 2.5 months. I don't have a question, but I would say to you guys that are still in school, take this opportunity and run with it. I like what he was saying. I do see a lot of y'all on your phones, and it's not like, oh, we're just here for show. Like, this is an opportunity. You're African American in Austin, Texas, at one of the biggest Fortune billion-dollar companies in the world. Like, working for Dell will really like change your life, and it has changed my life already. So I really do want to tell y'all, as an HBCU graduate, somebody that was super involved in school, that had the opportunity to be here, take all of it in, please.
But here's the deal, you guys, and then I'll come back to you all for some more questions. But here's the deal, and I told you earlier, I'm just here for the real conversation. You don't have to do that. Most people don't. I told my daughter when she went into the workforce, when I worked at NBC, I've worked at CBS, the highest level of broadcasting. In most places, there's a small percentage of people who are brilliant, right? Then there is what is called average. And there's a reason it's average, because that's what most people are in that instance. And then there's that bottom 10%. I told my daughter, the first thing is to keep your butt out of that bottom 10%. You can strive for that top 10. And what you find, the more often you deal with people, is the people from afar that you thought were brilliant. One or two of them are, but then when you really get in close, they're not all that impressive. Sometimes it's opportunity, sometimes they outwork you. And that often is the biggest indicator of success, that somebody got up an hour earlier, that they didn't pull out the phone, that they did ask a question, that they did move forward. We've already discussed and we already agree, whether you're a woman in here, whether you're an African American, Hispanic, an Asian, you are seen in this country, unfortunately, already slightly behind a white male who walks in a room, certainly, a white female who walks in a room. You're already in third place. Now you want to keep your butt out of fourth and fifth and sixth place if you can. So before I go back here, any other questions? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. And I'll come to you since you have one. I appreciate it. They're going to work the mic around to you, bro.
Hello, everybody. My name is Taiwo Raji. I go to Tuskegee University, senior computer science major. My question to you guys is, for people who aren't as comfortable building relationships, who are more introverted, what advice do you have for them, since relationships are so important in getting ahead in the industry?
Yeah. So one of the things I would suggest to you, and I'm big on giving references, there's a book called Quiet. And the book really talks about the strength of introverts. So the most extroverted person could be the loudest person in the room, but not saying anything. Speaking without signifying, you know, that Shakespearean note? Yeah. So in that book, it talks about the strength of the introvert and what other strengths you display naturally, like taking a step back before you respond. That's called impulse control. And that impulse control can be leveraged in such a way that you build relationships just by being an observer before you speak out, right? But you still need to put yourself in an environment where you are given the opportunity to meet and network with people. That's life, that's fact. But saying that you're an introvert and you don't really engage in this business, there are strengths to introverts. And I would suggest you take the Quiet survey, and you'll see that there are.
You mentioned that earlier, the idea that you don't necessarily have to be an extrovert.
Yeah, to succeed. I think find those opportunities where maybe it's a one-on-one conversation versus a large networking group. I mean, that is ways to succeed, and tell people how you prefer to communicate. And there's no problem with saying, hey, can we try this over email, and then, hey, can we meet up? break the ice that way. I mean, find the ways that work best for you, and don't be afraid to tell people.
Do you consider yourself introverted? Clearly. Yes. That answer right there, totally. But let me show you what you just did. You raised your hand and you stood up. Just that alone. No, look, so think about it. To your point, you don't have to come in loud, right? I'm loud. I get it. Right? Maybe that's why I'm on TV. But here's the deal. What you just did when we said, because I was ready to start answering questions, is you said, well, let me ask this question. You stood out in just doing that larger than if we had somebody who was just yapping loudly, asking a question, just to ask a question. So there are different modes of building relationships because, again, if we're looking, we will have noted, oh, he stood up. Just that in and of itself speaks to building relationships and things of that nature. Yes.
How are you? My name is Jalen Adams. I'm a junior business administration major from Dillard University, and what I've gotten so far is it's very hard for us in corporate America, and I'm sure you've heard the saying before, sometimes your skinfolk ain't your kinfolk. How do you work around trying to figure out who's really on your side and who's really working with you to get you to that next step?
That's interesting because I think Ed, you mentioned something
Brother,
about
that's a good
allyship.
question. You go ahead. That's a good. Woo! I'm sorry.
Take it, Dan.
No, go ahead. Well, I was just thinking, just taking the time to have a conversation. Yes, it's true. People are people, regardless of how they look. There's a definite underrepresentation for African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, and Pacific Islanders in the tech workforce. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. But there are people who don't look like you, don't have the same religion, and actually like different music that are probably closer to you. But if you don't have a conversation, if you don't at least open yourself up enough to hear somebody else speak and get a perspective, you'll never know. Bottom line is, you do your job, you perform the best you can, you think about where you want to be, you focus on what do you need to do to be better than you are today, because you are competing against yourself as well as everybody else.
Did you want to?
I would say find your allies, right? It's like when you're in a workplace, this is your cohort right here. Use these people as your resource, as your sounding board. These are the people you should be communicating with now. If you're not on LinkedIn, I would suggest use the Nearby app. Connect with each other while you're here and during this event. Reach out to one another. Build the circles that you want to use as allyships, as friendship going forward.
Faye, come on.
Oh my. This is a whole conversation. We could do a whole lot on this. But what I would say is, you really do need to know how to read people. And that's a skill that my father taught me that I didn't get in college. Because you have to be astute. And something that Ed mentioned, I think, in an earlier session, is that you should always document. Document. Someone could be your friend in a moment's notice, and sometimes it's not about being your friend or being an ally or being a helpful advocate for you. You'll hear this term a lot, young people. The needs of the business have changed. And it's nothing personal. The person had to make a decision based on needs of the business. And so therefore, you just need to learn how to cover and document your contributions. And then we'll talk after this is over.
But that being said, it is personal for the person who gets laid off.
Absolutely.
People say it ain't personal, it's business. No,
Absolutely.
Negro, I got a mortgage to pay. It
Absolutely.
is personal
With kids,
now, right?
With kids, don't forget the kids, with kids.
Yeah, and so I don't know that anything ever changes from literally when you go to kindergarten, right? You get a group of kids around you, you like some, you don't like some. Business is still kindergarten, right? So it really is finding, your crew socially at work, weeding out those that you know aren't helpful to you, trying to find allies, all of that. But it all comes back to you, right? And being smart enough to determine, I need to be involved in that, no, don't need to be involved in it. Life is all a read, right? And it's really ultimately on you to read, because soon your parents go away, your professors that care for you go away, and it really becomes on you now to figure out your way around. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Chisom. I'm a sophomore computer science major from Fisk University. So my question is, in a field like computer science, where it's all about talent and skills, is it really important to get like a graduate degree in computer science? I think that question is for you.
That's for me. Yeah, I was the one that went back to get that PhD, right? So I worked in industry before going to get my PhD. So I hustled up to another company. We'll leave that unnamed. I'm pretty sure some of you social media folks probably looked that up. But I went to get my PhD primarily because I hit a brick wall. But I kept in contact with some really great professors at Clark AU and at Georgia Tech. And they gave me a piece of advice. And their advice to me was, had I ever considered going to get a PhD? Now, hindsight is 20/20. I mean, my response was, why would I do that? I don't want to teach. But my response into what everyone is saying up here was it wasn't impulse controlled. I just didn't understand what that meant. I think it is important to go and get the graduate education PhD, and I tell you why. Because I will not be here in this role forever. And someone has to pick up that mantle. And what I hear students talk about, even at HBCUs, is that where are the professors that look like you? And my question to you is, when those professors go away, what will the professoriate look like? Dale is going to come to you and then ask the same question. Where are the black and brown students? Who's preparing them? And if the discipline of computer science, if you don't take those young people to shore up to do that graduate education, the discipline will go away and look very different. You have to decide, if you're coming to my office to complain about the lack of diversity, I always ask the students, then what are you prepared to do about it? Because Faye will not be here, and I have my countdown years going. Yes, I do.
I think the other side of that is, so in the tech industry, you can come in after your undergraduate. In fact, there's now an emphasis on taking people who don't have an undergraduate degree. But the fact is, when you look at who do the people in the tech industry really look up to?
Yeah.
It's those folks on the technical side with doctorates or MBAs or whatever it is. But they, the highest level, that's who they look up to. And when you start thinking about what does the future really look like, what is AI going to mean to your community? If you're not part of the research team looking at this stuff, if you're not establishing yourself, you will always be establishing that black and brown folks ain't there, they can't handle it. That you're putting your life and your community's life, your family's life, in the hands of somebody else. So think about how important is your community and your family to you when you're making these decisions. And the other side of the coin is, if you're curious about something, why aren't you going to continue?
Exactly.
It really is lifelong learning, but it's important to get these little credentials.
Yeah.
It's also important to innovate, right? The innovations that take place, it is important for those of you that are in the room to be a part of that innovation. I'll give you the example. I mean, we were talking about this back at the foundation. Do you realize that, just to go to AI, that a company, I'm not saying which company, but a company's artificial intelligence mechanism actually identified black and brown people, it was only 39% correct accuracy.
Right.
If I'm trying to board a plane or buy a car or invest in property or get a loan for a mortgage, those are day-to-day life experiences that are being impacted. We need people like you to help with technology and innovation that's at the forefront.
And even deeper, one of those companies, as I'm sure some of you saw, put up a gorilla and identified
Yes.
black folk
Yes.
as gorillas.
Yes.
And so that's why we all have to be a part of it. And just finally, I'm in awe of all of you guys, because I was the dude, here again, young lady, I was the guy who ran away from math in college. I took it my last semester. I took it credit, no credit. I was afraid it was going to mess up my GPA. I was one of those people, right? I did better than I thought I was going to do, but you really are on the forefront of what is going to be the future of this world. And clearly you have the abilities to do it. So run with that. So let's thank them, and then I'll tell you that story.
Get to that story.
Here's the story, and I only tell you this to tell you what you face even when you leave school. So in my business, you don't have a resume. Your resume is what you do on video. So instead of a paper resume, we had to show what you look like if you wanted to be in front of the camera like I did. The problem is, if you were in school, you didn't work anywhere, you didn't have anything to show, so you had to kind of make up your video tape. It's called a sizzle reel. So I taped Sports Center one day, and then I went in our school's studio, and I was the anchor, and I'd throw the video, and it was sad, but you know. So I had a friend who was working at a television station in Flint, Michigan. She got me an interview with the news director, and that's the person who does the hiring. I got the call. Going to interview you. So all the way up there, it was a 45-minute drive. I'm thinking about how my career's about to get started. I'm getting ready to get hired here. I'll work there for about a week, and then CBS will see me, and they'll hire me. And then Dan Rather at the time was anchor of the CBS Evening News. They would see me. They would move Dan Rather out, put me in that spot, and I would then be the anchor of the CBS Evening News. I had it all planned. I get up there. I'm out in front of the office. I got a lot of nervous energy. I'm moving my leg, you know, up and down like you do. My friend comes by. She gives me this, and I go, up. I go in the office, got my little suit on. I'm ready to roll. Mr. Gordon, how are you? Nice to meet you. What did you major in? I said proudly, back strong, communications and political science. I was saying to myself, here we go, start of my career. He said, I took a look at your tape. Now I'm calculating how much I should ask my man for my first salary. He says, well, can I give you a bit of advice? I said, sure, absolutely. He said, communications and political science, right? I said, yep. He said, maybe you should run for office because you will never make it in this business.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Dude, really? Not you need to improve on this. He told me I would never make it in this business. I thanked him, got to the car, deflated, drove on, went back home. A few years later, I'm sitting in the White House waiting on the president to come in for an interview, literally in the Oval Office. I see the phone on the desk. I said, I should call that son of a bitch right now. I said, hey, dude. Oh, you still in Flint, huh? What am I doing? I'm at the White House, waiting on the president. I simply say that to say that you will meet a lot of people who will be discouraging to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
They will tell you what you can't do. They won't give a care what or how it was delivered. He did not deliver that in love to me. Love would have been, you're not quite ready yet. Here's maybe what you should look at. So I had to take that harsh, shocking reality. I could have been deflated then. I could have been any number of things. And I could have taken it and never thought I would make it in the career that has given me so many opportunities. I've met kings, presidents, become friends with many of them. But had I listened to him, I would have never had the life I've been able to have. So I say to you, be your own advocate, believe in yourself, and do what you can do, but take your opportunities when they come and make the best of them. Guys, I want to say thank you so much. Unfortunately, you all know, some of you, I missed my flight. They canceled it last night. Then I was an hour late because they delayed the plane. So I'm running to a car. I wish I could stay and say hello, but I got to get back to CBC. I should maybe call the dude and say, I'm still working, dude. The hell with you. But I want to thank you so much. Good luck to you and appreciate it.